1. Towards the start of the pandemic, I was creating interactive e-learning courses for a university's research department. Basically, my department made sure that all the human subject research conducted at the college was done humanely. You know, proper disclosures, no vulnerable populations, real questions that need to be resolved. We once had a proposal where the grad student researcher wanted to make a bunch of people smoke cigarettes in a lab setting to determine if they were bad for you. At the time, I was in the testing stages of a course I'd been making for the past 2 months. It was pretty basic. Picture a PowerPoint slide that has a voiceover, some small animations and videos, and quizzes you had to complete at the end. Every now and then, you had to click a large button at the bottom of the screen that said, "Next Slide." My boss, who hated me, the feeling was mutual, told me the 3 people she wanted to review the course for both content and functionality. The first person completed the course in 25 minutes, gave some small notes on wording. The second person took 24 hours, double-checked all my sources and followed all the links, etc. No problems there. Pointed out some misspellings in my closed captions file. The third person, however, was struggling. After 72 hours, I followed up via email, no answer. 48 hours after that, I called her, no response. Finally, I told my boss I was just waiting on her review, and I got an answer from the woman saying she didn't know how to access the course. This was surprising to me. In all my emails to her, I'd included instructions on how to open and proceed in the e-learning. I even had screenshots with giant arrows and colorful text that explained it. I thought this was overkill, but I figured I'd be thorough. I promise you, this was nothing more complicated than clicking on a link I provided, and then clicking Next Slide every 2 minutes or so. The instructions were more to do with what sort of feedback I was looking for. I sent another email with the instructions. She followed up with an email saying she still didn't understand. I tried calling her in Teams, she didn't pick up. Then a chat from her popped up in my personal Skype account. As long as I'd been at the company, we had never used Skype. I don't know how she found my personal Skype, which I hadn't used in years, but she did. Her chat read, "How do I pick up when you call?" I typed back, "Click the green button." So I call her again in Teams. She picks up. I ask her if she can hear me. It's silent. I wait a moment. Ask again. Still silent, so I hang up. Then I check my Skype again. She's chatted me there. "I can hear you." "Oh, I couldn't hear you. Do you have your mic set up properly?" "I don't know. Does this computer come with a mic?" At this point I was panicking. I can't walk her through setting up a microphone if she can't figure out how to click a link. So I write, "Okay, I'm going to call you again. I can read your chats here and you can hear me talk." I call her again, and again silence. But I ask, "Can you hear me?" in our Teams phone call. She answers, "I can hear you," in our Skype chat. I say, "Okay." And then I proceed to share my screen with her and click on the link in my email to show her the course. "Wait, how did you do that? Can you do it on my computer?" And this is the point where I thought, it's probably easier to just get her there on her computer and let her off on her way through the course than it is to have her click on the link herself. So I proceeded to tell her how to give me remote access to her computer, pulled up the email, scrolled down a bit for the link, and clicked it. Then I said, "Sorry for all the trouble. Any questions?" She said, "No," in Skype chat. "I'll get you started then, thanks," and I hung up. I started to work on other things. 2 minutes later, my Skype pings again. "It's stuck," the message reads. "What's stuck?" "It just stops playing at a certain point." Click the Next button at the bottom of the screen to keep going. "What next button?" At this point, I was officially awestruck. But it was about to get worse. I called her in Teams again. "Do you remember how you gave me remote access?" "No." So I talked her through that again. Once I had control of her computer, I went to her browser, clicked Maximize, and pointed at the Next Slide button. "Huh? It wasn't there before." "That's okay." And I hung up. Mere moments later, another Skype ping. It disappeared again. I call her. I talk her through how to let me remote into her computer for a third time. This time, I notice that her browser isn't maximized again. It's just slightly smaller. And that makes the next button disappear at the bottom of the screen, so you couldn't see it unless you scrolled down. Oh, that's a bug we won't have to worry about once the course is in our learning management system. Every course has to be in full screen, so for the demo here, just maximize the screen, or scroll down to click next. How do I maximize scroll? She said in Skype. I'm confused. You mean, how do you maximize the screen? You just click this square button up here. My Skype dinged again. Oh, but how did you move down earlier? That's when I realized the reason she never saw my screenshots in the email, the reason she couldn't find the link in the email, the reason she couldn't find the next button, was because she didn't know how to scroll down. I still can't remember how the rest of that conversation went. I guess I must have talked her through how to scroll down. She never did make it through the rest of the course, but I got let go during the COVID downsizing. I was the least tenured employee. And also because they stopped making her do things on a computer and just printed out all her projects for her, like 200-page research proposals, and sent them to her via email. She was in her early 40s, had a computer on her desk for her entire 15 years in the department. Never scrolled down until that day. I honestly can't comprehend how she found my personal Skype without scrolling, much less how she'd ever been able to complete basic work functions. I think if I had to learn something from this incident, it's that the mildly pleasant lady who brings in baked goods to the office once per week probably has more job security than almost anyone in any company. Long-term professional success would seem to entirely hang upon how good your homemade snickerdoodles are, and how frequently you provide them for your employers. 2. So, my job ranged from helping old folks buy some home PC setup for Skyping their grandkids, to helping a boss buy maybe one server set and 20 machines. Not only would I listen to their needs, budgets, wants, and then help choose their products, but sometimes I'd be sent to install the systems bought. To be clear, I was hardware and OS install only, maybe a third-party software on special request. The idea was that as soon as the customer is logged in and online, the rest is up to them with a "good luck and thanks for your purchase. Here's my card if you need something else." One day I get a big score. A boss walked in and started evaluating the stuff we had on the shelf. You know, the cheap plastic for home PC garbage the chain wants to buy low and sell high en masse. This is pretty normal, but this guy is using a clipboard, pen, paper, and one of the oldest calculators I'd ever seen. A Casio Scientific with the yellowed buttons and screen about the same size as a post-it note. I love those things. Anyway, we get talking and I ask about the clipboard. He says he needs 12 PCs, one for him, one for a secretary, 4 for some artists, 4 for some draftsmen, technical drawing for designing anything from cereal toys to car gear boxes, and the rest for accounts and HR. I said no problem and went towards the big ticket items like Macs for the artists. After a while, he'd filled in about 5 sheets of A4 before asking, "Can I get these customized?" Yes, that's probably going to take some time to explain more in depth. "Oh, that's no problem. How about you come to my office on Thursday, 2 p.m., and we can get the brass off the situation." After checking with my manager, I'm highly encouraged to go and make an afternoon of it. There were plenty of others on the floor to cover me. Thursday rolled around, and I get to the address. I stare in confusion. It's a building site, and the concrete hadn't even been poured yet. I back up and park nearby to check my phone and make sure I have the address correct. It is, but I decide to ring the boss. After a few seconds, he waves me over from the porta-cabin. Wiping my now muddy office shoes as I get in, I ask what's going on, and the boss reveals that we're basically in his living room, but it's not built yet. Next door will be the office, 3 floors, and that is going to be an architect company with this house as the flagship design. Where I live, it's not unheard of. A lot of businesses here in the UK behave like farmsteads or small holdings, even if it's a specialty ice cream cafe, or a plumber's supply warehouse, or maybe a kitchen and bathroom showroom. The business owner is almost always living in line of sight and in close proximity of the business. Okay, I nod in slow but sure understanding. He walks me over to the old-fashioned way of doing things. Lots of big box offices, draftsman's table, actual blueprints, and mechanical pencils and pens. Numerous highlighters and other stationery. He even has a fax machine set up. It was like walking into a living museum, and I couldn't be happier. He points to a garage on the drawings and then to the room next door. "I want a server in there." He then traces a finger from there to the building next door. Not his house, but the business. "Then wires to go through a pipe underground to the receptionist." He points at an expansive lobby area, then up the walls and branches off to the different department. Mind if I take photos for notes? "I trust you." Later on, I get back to my place of work and sit at my desk. I look at the jumble of towers and devices that had piled up for me to fix or upgrade while I was out. I'll do them the day after. It was already dark outside, and I planned on getting home after reporting to my manager. Basically, I was being asked to do something I'd never done before, but I had a plan. Manager comes over and asks how I got on. "Can you put me through pat testing and installation stuff again, like yesterday?" "Why? I thought you had that already." "I might need a refresher. He wants me to install cables and power in phone cables." "That's easy though, you do it every day." "No, not like that, like this." I point to the big plastic cable conduits on the workplace wall. "But that's contractor stuff. You don't do that. We don't provide that kind of thing, we're not builders." "I'm sorry, you'll have to decline this one. We're not covered for it." The next morning I pick up the phone and give the guy the bad news. He wouldn't take no for an answer, though. "When do you finish work?" 7 p.m. every day, 5 on Sundays. Why?" "I see. What if you come to work for me at about 8, 1 day a week?" Fast forward to the following Monday. I'm stood there in the mud with wellies borrowed from my boss for the evening, holding up my phone and him holding up the blueprint, pointing and wandering around the foundations. "I think you'll need Cat 5, maybe fiber optic if you're okay with the budget, running through there and maybe up through that wall and ceiling there, power too. But I'm not an electrician." "Don't worry about that, just tell me what I need." Fast forward again another week, and the skeleton of the building was already up, conduits set inside concrete with the proper shielding, and some cables already tied in. He wanted to do things a bit differently, you see. Most buildings in the UK have IT infrastructure built as an afterthought, conduits and cables trailing around in untidy fashion. He wanted this building to come alive, everything out of sight but highly functional and adaptable. The conduits were big enough so that the cables could be pulled out and rethreaded if necessary, without ripping them out of the walls again, while ensuring that workstations worked like hospital beds, able to move and reinstall at whim. Little did I know what else he was going to do. Alongside the IT, he has filing cabinets built into the wall, and this was a good thing because a year later, an entire section of the country has a power cut for 3 days. I was still working for the boss as a part-time IT professional. The business was small enough that I could remote into a workstation or server for anything small, and local enough to just pop in at night or early morning for the more crucial stuff. On the day of the power cut, I got in as early as I could and checked the UPS units on each floor, and let myself into the house. I was trusted with a key. Making sure Doggo was okay with me being there first, I checked the server and compared the electricity supply and news updates. Erring against caution, I decided to ensure backups were saved and shut everything down to complete blackout safety, taking the strain off the UPS. For 3 days, I kept offering apologies to the boss. Businessmen don't like it when their computers go down. Nevertheless, he was calm and kept waving me away. On the 4th day, the building suddenly hummed back to life, and I felt better. After checking the network and individual machines were working properly again, I went back to boss and let him know. Finally, I understood why he was so calm. He showed me the filing cabinets hidden in the wall paneling in his office. He then took me to the accountant's office where the same had been installed. The accountant even had a mechanical calculator, the kind with a massive crank handle and rolls of paper. The draftsmen had their tables and stationery set up next to their computer desks. I was highly impressed and wondered why more businesses don't operate like this. Bit of a sad ending, though. The boss made his money, and everyone was laid off with more than generous packages. He moved out to somewhere near Florence, and the building was turned into some kind of yoga and ballet center. I wonder if they know they have top-notch network in the walls. Oh well. 3. This is one of the most absurdly hilarious things I've seen in my current job. A high-level marketing exec, very high in the company, but not at the VP level, or we wouldn't be dealing with her directly, is understandably very angry because she's getting calls at all hours on her mobile from her crit-sit team that alerts on-call engineers of failures and emergencies in the hardware-software infrastructure. There are a couple of hundred teams involved, and probably 1,000 or 2 engineers in the on-call system. I'm in there, but in 5 years I've only been called twice, and once was an area of business I'm not part of. Though I did respond, and collected some sweet, sweet overtime. So it's not one of the people who is on call, hence angry and very much WTF-y. She has received a bunch of text-to-speech voicemails, all sounding very urgent, but they triggered her well-developed "this is not legit, I should notify security" detectors. The company, from time to time, and without announcement, sends phishing emails to different groups to find out who might fall for one. Awareness of the issue is above average here, I would say. We went round and round over this. It looks an awful lot like a phishing attack. The grammar and spelling are characteristic of a well-known region of the world, not Nigeria, where a lot of suspect emails come from. It says it's reporting a problem with a particularly popular X500 database. Also a product of the company, but the team it references doesn't exist. X500 Prod. Well, that is the name of the popular database system, and production is a common name for an instance of said database product. We just don't have an instance named that. It would be some kind of sophisticated attack that knows what crit-sit alerting system we use, and thinks it knows which database system we use internally, but gets the instance name wrong and targets someone whose technical knowledge would probably fit on a single glossy brochure for whichever product she works with in marketing. It took us days to find out who was responsible for the alerting system. It took a further 2 days to convince him to help us find the target's name somewhere in the on-calls list in the system. They kept insisting that it was some kind of phishing or social engineering attack, and not coming from our system. Anyway, they relented, and searched for her name and/or phone number. Nope, her name and her phone number were not anywhere in the system. The "this is an attack" faction is gaining support. We can see that these calls originated from outside our phone network, but that doesn't help. The exit point for the alerting system is external for obvious reasons. You can't report a problem with the phone system if you have to use the phone system to report it. Then I see an email. Why does team name have phone number as their on-call number? I look at the phone number and see that it is our company's front door main corporate phone number. Team name is the name of the team that manages the crit-sit alerting system. Epiphanies and revelations abound. It turns out that someone set the on-call number for a test environment of the alerting system to our corporate mainline. You know, for testing. Someone is from a part of the world where the characteristic grammatical mistakes often found in phishes and spams are common. They reproduce the text of alerts from memory. There's no shame or shade intended here. English is a very difficult language, and this part of the world has had English as a part of its elementary school curriculum for centuries, long enough to have developed a peculiar and characteristic set of grammatical inconsistencies. In many parts of this region, different dialects of the local language are difficult for people of other dialects to understand. So, English is the lingua franca for many of these folk. Yes, I did that on purpose because it's fun to tease the French. Phone number is answered by a sophisticated phone menu system that accepts voice, as well as dial pad entry. Apparently, it was an interpreting and recorded message from our alerting system, as, somehow, Please direct this call to this person. The now substantially less angry marketing exec. Updates. Nothing too major, but it's interesting to me. The first proposed attempted mitigation was to remove the affected user from the dial-by-name system. It sounds great at first, but it's not like the IVR system is going to interpret the message as a specific request to call the specific person. Somehow the message appears to be activating the dial-by-name feature, which is likely doing some kind of best-fit matching among possible candidates. If she is opted out of the dial-by-name system, it will probably just redirect the fire hose at someone else. Still, this is the prevailing plan on the basis that at least she won't receive calls anymore. The opt-out list is typically for senior leadership team executives, some of whose names might be commonly known among cranks, weirdos, and angry game console users, to the extent that those are distinct groups. The user account that has the front door main corporate phone number as its on-call number is apparently a critical internal role that can't be edited or removed by someone who does not have an owner role. Administrator roles aren't good enough. I'm an admin, but only for the team I work for. And systems engineer roles aren't good enough. We don't yet know who the owner is. As might be guessed from the fact that we haven't shut this off yet and can't change the number it's dialing, it turns out that this is in the production environment of the CritSet alerting system. The number got set by someone to test something relatively minor, not knowing that the setting was write once, edit nobody. A less commonly used form of storage than write once, read many, or the less well-known but infamous WOM. Almost predictably and implied earlier, there are now people saying they recall in the past hearing about people who get mysterious nighttime phone calls from this system. In thinking about how one blind, unintelligent system can consistently cause a completely unrelated blind, unintelligent system to do something seemingly coherent and intelligible, it seems obvious. We're probably lucky that this one instance happened to hit the same person repeatedly, because this problem most likely has existed in some form or another since we switched to this particular brand of ticketing system. An observation that just occurred to me. One blind, unintelligent system can consistently cause a completely unrelated blind, unintelligent system to do something seemingly coherent and intelligible. It's terrifying. This is not like the Andromeda strain, where a critical message is missed because a dead fly fell into a computer printer, resulting in the message not getting printed. This is the architecture and construction of a building creating a condition where flies die in some controlled manner, and then fall in a consistent stream of dead flies into a printer, coincidentally time-aligned with the printer printing a critical message repeatedly. In seriousness, though, I would consider it a design flaw that this is even possible. Sure, make it so that a recording could intentionally trigger transfer to a specific number, but for a simulated human voice reading an arbitrary pre-written statement that has nothing to do with "please connect me to extension 27B6, it should always fail. 4. This story is from years ago when I provided tech support for a company of cheap PC clones that are no longer available in the United States, but which are still sold in other parts of the world. Now, to say that many of the purchasers of these computers were first-time users is a vast understatement of the case. Many of my best stories from this time come from the nexus between bad hardware design, cheap customer service solutions, and insanely novice users. So sit right back and I'll tell you the tale of the mythical creature known as the user and his capricious and unpredictable ways. Today's call you will never forget. On this call, the caller complains that his computer no longer boots up. In checking his specs, I note that it is one of the notorious riser board units. These are designed to use a smaller motherboard than most computers of the day, and this is done by only having one expansion slot on the motherboard, and then inserting into this slot a riser board with 5 or 6 expansion slots on it. This basically moves most of the expansion slot portion of the motherboard onto a daughter board, and changes the space requirements to make the computer smaller. But in order to make the expansion slots on the daughter board compatible with all the cards out there are massive data and power connections between these two boards, resulting in an unstable situation where if the daughter board shifts even a very small amount in its slot, it will ground out the entire computer and leave it unable to boot. The solution? The correct solution would be to send a technician on site and have them remove and reinstall the daughter board, and thus get the computer running again. The cheap customer service solution we are given instead is to walk the user through the process of opening the ridiculously complicated case, identifying the riser board, use a screwdriver to remove it, and then reinsert it, put everything back together, and hope it now works. Often it was a rinse-repeat sort of thing where the second or third time is the charm. These calls take a ridiculous amount of time, and tend to make computers uncomfortable as they are being called on to basically perform heart surgery on their computer. Never wanting to assume the hardest solution first, I start with basic things like checking if the computer is plugged into the wall, and having the user unplug the power cord from the back of the computer and from the wall, and reconnect it to make sure it isn't loose anywhere. We also check the power and connection to the monitor to make sure nothing is hinky there. And so we step through all the basic troubleshooting. And now it's time to tackle the dreaded riser board issue. With more than the normal level of difficulty, we get the case open. I am now describing the internals of the computer to him to help identify the motherboard and riser board. And the user says, hang on, I don't want to drip wax into the computer." "I'm sorry? Did you say wax?" "Yeah, I'm using a candle to light the inside of the case." "Why are you using a candle?" "Because the power is out." "Did it not occur to you that you would need power to use the computer?" "Sure, but it has a battery in it." "And indeed it does. A watch battery." "A battery just strong enough to help the computer not forget the date and time when turned off and unplugged. And even so, these normally need to be replaced about once a year, or the computer forgets what day it is." I explain this to the user, but he doesn't want any part of it. He wants the computer to work during a power outage of a small watch battery. I apologize that I can't help him with that, and then help him put the case back together again, after which he asks to talk to my supervisor. This was easy to accomplish. My supervisor and about 3 other people had been listening in on the call, after it started to go long, and well before we determined the source of his trouble is a power outage. They're still listening and generally having a good laugh at the befuddled user's expense. The supervisor comes and listens to the user's complaint, which isn't about me, he likes me, but all about the computer not working when the power is out. It was voted Call of the Week. 5. This story is from years ago when I provided tech support. No, this isn't deja vu. This is just another story from the same person. I get a call from a young man who introduces himself by declaring that he builds computers for a living. I ask myself, why, if you have the ability to build a computer, would you ever buy one of these cheapo systems? After purchase, he wants to boost the video and bought an add-in VGA card. Installing such a card is easy, but sometimes you have to change a jumper or a dip switch on the computer's motherboard to get the computer to recognize and use the new hardware. For those who don't remember such things, dip switches are like little tiny light switches that can be turned on and off with the tip of a pin. Pin jumpers are little pieces of plastic that can be placed over 2 pins to create a closed circuit, or removed to break the circuit. Pin jumpers are cheaper, so that's what we use. Some of our computers at this time have literally 50 or more jumpers, and if you open or close the wrong circuit, it will render the computer unusable without a technician to put things back the way they should be. We had one case of an OCD ADD teenager who had been swapped out twice on his computer after pulling every single jumper off the motherboard, and when he did it for a 3rd time, they bought his computer back from him and banned him from ever buying another one in his life. But that's a different story. So it's not unusual on our computers of the day to need to change a jumper pin configuration for the computer to recognize and use an add-in video card. And knowing this, the young man checks the schematic for the motherboard and the computer itself, but cannot identify which jumper does that, but he does see a chip labeled VGA, so he extracts the chip, but now his computer no longer boots at all. This is a real forehead smack moment for me. First, his model is designed to auto-detect an add-in video card and turn on the onboard video as soon as you boot it up with an add-in card installed. He did not need to change anything for his new graphics card to work. Second, the only chip on his motherboard that had VGA written on it is his CMOS BIOS chip. For those of you who don't actually build computers for a living, this is the only part of the computer that has programming when you first turn a computer on. Its job is to make sure everything needed is there for the computer to work, and then looks for and loads the more extensive programming normally stored on the hard drive that gets you doing all the other fun things a computer can do. By removing this chip, he had essentially rendered his computer brain dead. And because it is a flashable CMOS of the electrically erasable programmable memory type, the chip itself was destroyed by the process of removal. Any programming it had contained had been erased by the process. It could not be reinstalled and then made to work. The only viable solution for this issue is a full motherboard replacement. And since what he has done also completely voids his warranty, he has to pay for the parts and labor himself. Needless to say, he is none too happy with the result. He escalates it up to my supervisor and then my manager, but I leave extensive notes and it remains a non-warranty repair. A little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Just to address some frequently asked questions. Why was the BIOS stamped VGA? Because VGA was still new when this company offered computers that had VGA and cheaper ones that did not. So they have stamped all of the VGA-compatible BIOS chips with VGA to aid manufacturing. How would removing an EEPROM from a socket erase it? It wasn't socketed on his motherboard. I suspect to save costs, the company had opted to solder the chipset onto the motherboard. While I did not ask if he had unsoldered it or just pried it off, I would bet milk money based on the result and the rest of the call that he dry pried it. What was made clear in the call was that he had tried to reinsert it before calling, and still could not get the system to boot. He either flashed the EEPROM, damaged it, or damaged the motherboard. Either way, result was dead system non-warranty repair, and we really didn't have to troubleshoot further. And you know, they are always breathing down your neck in such settings to shave as many seconds off your calls as possible. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Terrific Tales of Technology, number 11. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you liked the video, then please yell at the like button, ask a gopher to make a comment, and possibly subscribe if you're into that sort of thing. Okay, let's see. We have a day late, but a birthday shout-out for Lauren Iverson. Right. Now, I just will add, if you do want a birthday shout-out, please send me an email to kingofthecities@gmail.com. You can find that in the description of every video. You can find it in my contact section. I believe it's also in the FAQ section on Discord, which I need to expand, really. There's only a few questions in there. There's more I need to add. Best to send a week before. You could send it earlier. I'm going to create a folder just for birthday shoutouts, so I'll take to checking what I'm doing each video. But week before is generally ideal. Not too early, not too late. You could send it later than that, and I'll do my best, but there's no guarantee if you send it later. There's also no guarantee if you send it on the right amount of time. I mean, there's no guarantees in life, man. You know, you take your chances. You roll the dice. You roll with the punches. You roll with cheese and salad on it. What was I saying? Oh yeah, birthday shoutouts. Okay, so Lauren Iverson, happy birthday to you, Lauren. And as is traditional, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lauren. Happy birthday to you. I have one tomorrow. In fact, it's going to be a double one, so I have to figure out how to do that. Do I sing happy birthday twice? Do I make another Hellfreezer? How would I go about that? it would probably involve science. Maybe if I mix some Red Bull, some chocolate cake, a little bit of grumpiness, some haggis for the Scottishness. Yeah, that'd work. Okay, anyway, getting distracted now. So until next time. Thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.